The overhead lights in the cabin dimmed for just a second. A flicker so brief I almost missed it. Then I saw my sister Jessica's hand moving in slow motion, her fingers wrapped around the bottle of Pinot Noir, tilting it deliberately over my 6-year-old son's watercolor painting. Not spilling, pouring. The dark red liquid hit the paper in a deliberate stream, bleeding across 3 days of careful brushstrokes. The blue lake, the green pines, the yellow sunset Jacob had mixed himself. My throat closed, not from shock, but from recognition. I'd seen this exact expression on Jessica's face before. Bored cruelty, the look of someone crushing an ant just to watch it squirm. But this time, the ant was my son. He needs to learn the world doesn't care about his little doodles, Jessica said, her words slightly slurred, but her aim perfect. It's taking up space on the table. She drained the glass, set it down on the soaked paper with a wet thud, and surveyed the room like a comedian waiting for applause. My cousin delivered applause from the sofa, laughing along with Jessica's cruelty. The laughter rippled through the cabin, sharp, ugly, performative, my mother's nervous titter, my cousin's smirk, and Jacob, frozen at the table, staring at the ruins of his grandfather's gift, his small hands trembling above the spreading wine stain. My name is Sarah. I'm 29, and I've spent my entire life as a sous chef, not just in restaurants, but in this family. Jacob's father left when I was pregnant, unable to handle the responsibility of fatherhood, and I've been raising my son alone ever since. Managing tickets, keeping the kitchen calm, making sure everyone else got fed while I survived on scraps. This is the story of how I stopped cooking for people who'd never say thank you. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I didn't move for those first few seconds. I couldn't. I was watching something worse than bullying. I was watching inheritance. Jacob's shoulders shook, but he made no sound. His face turned mottled red as he bit his lip until it went white, physically compressing himself into the chair, trying to become small enough to vanish. He wasn't looking for comfort. He was performing the survival technique I'd taught him through 29 years of demonstration. Disappear, stay quiet, let the predators lose interest. The fawn response. I'd named it once in therapy, had sobbed when I recognized it in myself. And now I was watching my 6-year-old son learn it in real time, his nervous system encoding the same lesson mine had. Your pain is entertainment for the people who should protect you. Your job is to smile through humiliation so the adults don't feel uncomfortable. He was learning to be me. The realization hit like cold lake water in my lungs. This wasn't just about a ruined painting. I was watching him inherit my trauma, the genetic curse of doormat DNA. If I didn't break this chain right now, in this exact second, he'd spend the next 30 years apologizing for taking up space. I looked at my father, David, at the head of the table. His hands were folded over his empty plate, his face carved from granite. But I knew him. I saw his knuckles white gripping the fork. I saw the muscle jumping in his jaw. The air pressure in the cabin changed, heavy with 3 decades of things left unsaid. I stood up. The chair scraped against the wood floor, a harsh, grinding sound that cut the laughter like a blade through muscle. I didn't grab paper towels. I didn't try to save the painting. I walked around the table and positioned my body between Jessica and Jacob, using myself as a wall. I looked at her, not at the wine, at her. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the urge to fix anything, to smooth edges, to crack a joke and release the tension. I felt the cold mathematical clarity of a woman done paying interest on a debt she never owed. "You enjoyed that," I said. My voice wasn't loud. It was flat, clinical, the tone I used to fire kitchen staff who'd crossed a line. "You enjoyed watching a 6-year-old create something, and you enjoyed destroying it." Jessica rolled her eyes, already refilling her glass from the bottle on the sideboard. "Oh, Sarah, don't be dramatic. It's paper. I did him a favor. Now he can learn something useful instead of making messes." Useful. I let the words sit there, tasting like metal. The room went silent. Jessica's smirk faltered, her glass pausing halfway to her lips. My mother gasped, that sharp intake of air that signaled incoming panic mode. I didn't blink. I wasn't managing tickets anymore. I was a mother watching a predator, and I was done negotiating. Before I could continue, my mother, Susan, rushed over. But she didn't go to Jacob, didn't hug the crying child whose gift lay ruined. She grabbed a handful of napkins and started frantically scrubbing at the table. "Oh, Jessica, you're so clumsy." Her voice hit that high, tight register that meant she was about to unravel. She attacked the wine stain, ignoring the destroyed painting completely. "Sarah, don't make that face. It was an accident. We can buy him a coloring book, a nice one with stickers." She looked up at me, her smile stretched thin as fishing line, her eyes begging. "Let's just have a nice dinner, please. It's Labor Day. We're family." I watched her, and the pity I usually felt evaporated. My mother wasn't confused or helpless. She was an addict, addicted to the illusion of a happy family, willing to pay any price to maintain it, except she never paid with her own currency. She taxed us. The good children, the quiet ones, the ones who wouldn't burn the house down. She sacrificed our dignity to appease the monster because Jessica was the only one who threatened to leave. Susan would let Jacob bleed if it kept the carpet clean. "Exactly," Jessica said, emboldened. She leaned back, swirling her wine. "He's too soft. Sarah babies him. I'm doing him a favor, teaching him how the real world works." That was it, the final thread snapping. My father, David, stood up. Not quickly, with the slow, creaking weight of a building finally giving way to structural failure. He walked to the mantel where a rustic wooden sign hung, its cursive script declaring, "Family is forever." He stared at it for a long moment, then turned to face Susan. "You wiped the table," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You didn't check on the boy. You worried about the wood stain." Susan froze, wine-soaked napkin in hand. "David, stop being dramatic. I'm just trying to—" "Oh, you're trying to keep the peace," he interrupted. "But there is no peace, Susan. There's just silence, and I'm done paying for it." He looked down at his left hand, at the gold wedding band buried in 40 years of flesh. He walked to the kitchen sink, pumped dish soap onto his knuckle, and began working it off. It was painful to watch, him grimacing, pulling, twisting until the ring slid over the joint with a wet pop. He walked back to the table, held the ring over the puddle of wine still soaking Jacob's painting, and dropped it. It hit the wet paper with a dull thud, splashing red droplets onto the white tablecloth. "I'm done keeping your peace," he said, "and I'm done protecting you." The silence wasn't just quiet. It was a vacuum, sucking air from the room. My mother stared at the ring sitting in the wine like it was a live grenade. Jessica laughed, a sharp, nervous bark. "Dad, are you having a stroke? You're going to divorce Mom over a $5 watercolor set? That's pathetic." David didn't look at her. He walked to his travel bag in the corner, unzipped it, and pulled out a thick black leather-bound notebook. Old, spine-creased, edges worn. He set it on the table with a heavy thud. "I've been a structural engineer for 40 years, Jessica," he said, his voice calm, factual, terrifying. "My job is tracking stress fractures, finding cracks before buildings collapse. I track failures." He opened the book. The pages were filled with his handwriting, neat columns of dates and numbers, precise as blueprint measurements. 3 years ago," he continued, running a finger down the first page, "you told me you needed $5,000 for a business loan. Said your influencer career was taking off, but you needed new equipment." Jessica crossed her arms, rolling her eyes. "Yeah, and I paid you back, mostly. What is this, an audit?" "You didn't pay back a dime," David said. "But that's not the point. The point is, I started tracking, not just big loans. Everything. Every time your mother said she needed extra cash for groceries. Every time she withdrew money for home repairs that never happened. Every time our joint savings dipped for emergencies." He turned the book so Jessica and Susan could see the columns. "I tracked dates. I tracked amounts. Then I hired a forensic accountant to track where the money actually went." Susan made a small, strangled noise. She reached out a trembling hand. "David, please don't do this. Not in front of everyone." "Everyone needs to know," David said, "because everyone has been laughing at Sarah. Everyone thinks she's weak, but she's not weak. She's been paying the bill." He looked at me then, his eyes full of deep, aching apology. "I let this happen, Sarah. I let you think you were less than her. I let you think she was special, and you were just there. But I was watching. I was counting." He turned the page. Taped to it were bank transfer receipts. "This isn't an allowance, Jessica. This is ransom." David's finger traced a line of red ink. "August 14th, 2 years ago. $12,000. You said it was for a brand partnership buy-in. April 3rd last year. $8,000. Medical bills, you claimed." He looked up, meeting Susan's terrified eyes. "But the biggest one was 3 years ago. The night of the Labor Day party we didn't attend because you said you were sick, Susan." Susan was shaking her head frantically, tears streaming. "David, stop. Please, not the—" "You didn't protect the name." David's voice cracked with fury I'd never heard. "You protected a criminal." He turned another page. This time, no receipt. A copy of a police report taped flat. "The $174,000 wasn't for business loans, Jessica. It wasn't for gifts. It was hush money." Jessica froze. Her arrogance evaporated, replaced by stark terror. She glanced at the door but didn't move. 3 years ago, David said to the room, Jessica drove home intoxicated from a party. She struck a parked car. Then she struck a pedestrian, a 19-year-old girl walking her dog. The girl suffered a broken leg and head trauma, but thankfully recovered after months of physical therapy. I gasped. The room tilted. I remembered that time. Jessica had been traveling for a month. Mom said she was in Europe, finding herself. "She didn't stop," David continued. "She fled the scene." Susan sobbed into her hands, her body rocking. "You took our retirement money," David said, his voice shaking. $174,000. Paid for a lawyer to bury it. Paid a settlement to the girl's family to keep it out of civil court. Paid the repair shop to fix the Denoff books. You told me it was a parking dispute. You told me it was handled." He slammed the book shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "You stole our future to cover her crime. Then you let her sit here and mock a 6-year-old boy for painting a picture. You taught her destruction has no consequences." He looked at Jessica, pale and silent. "You're not a businesswoman, Jessica. You're not an influencer. You're a liability. And your mother is your accomplice." The silence that followed was suffocating, the sound of a family myth dying. Jessica tried to rally. She stood, smoothing her expensive dress, summoning the arrogance that had protected her for 33 years. She glared at David. "So what? It was an accident. Mom helped me. That's what mothers do. They help, unlike you." Her chin lifted. "You're just jealous Mom loves me more. I don't need your money. I have my own brand, my own followers. I don't need this dusty cabin anyway." David looked at her with cold, detached pity. Not a father looking at a daughter, but an engineer examining a condemned structure. "You have nothing, Jessica." He reached into the back of the ledger and pulled out a folded document, placing it on the table next to his discarded wedding ring and the ruined painting. "This cabin is in my name, my inheritance from my father. Your mother's name isn't on the deed." He smoothed the paper flat. "You have 1 hour to vacate. All of you, Susan included. I'm listing it for sale tomorrow morning to recoup the retirement funds you stole." "You can't kick us out," Susan wailed, clutching her chest. "Where will I go? It's pouring rain." "I don't know," David said, voice devoid of emotion. "Maybe you can stay with the daughter you invested so much in." He turned back to Jessica. "And regarding your own money. As of 10 minutes ago, while you were pouring wine on my grandson's art, I froze the joint accounts. I reported the transfers as fraud pending forensic investigation. The bank locked everything. Your credit cards, Mom's cards, the business account you funnel money through." Jessica grabbed her phone, fingers flying across the screen. She tapped her banking app. I watched her face crumble, color draining until she looked gray and small. "It's declined," she whispered. And there it was. The illusion shattered. Without the financial IV drip from my parents, her status, confidence, personality evaporated instantly. She wasn't a powerful woman. She was a child in a costume she'd never paid for. Her power was rented, and the lease was up. Your power was rented, David echoed my thoughts. And the landlord is closing the building. He walked to the front door and opened it wide. The storm outside had broken, rain pouring in sheets, turning the dirt driveway to mud. Wind howled into the warm cabin. "Get out!" Jessica looked at my cousin, who'd been laughing earlier. He studied the floorboards, suddenly fascinated. She looked at Susan, who just wept, useless and broken. Finally, she looked at me, eyes wide and desperate. "Sarah," she pleaded, voice trembling, "tell him he's crazy. You can't let him do this. I'm your sister." I looked at her, the woman who'd terrorized me for 3 decades. I looked at the wine stain on Jacob's painting. I thought about the silence my son had been learning, the silence I was breaking. "You should hurry," I said, my voice cold as the rain outside. "Traffic's gonna be terrible." The months that followed were difficult but necessary. David filed for divorce 2 weeks after that Labor Day confrontation, and the proceedings were finalized within 4 months. The marriage that had lasted 40 years ended with a judge's signature and the division of what little assets remained after Jessica's crimes had consumed their savings. 6 months after that night at the cabin, I found myself visiting my father at his new place, a smaller apartment overlooking the city park. The light there was different, not the dim yellow of the cabin or harsh fluorescent of the old family house, but white and clean, streaming through big windows. Smaller than the house David had shared with Susan for 40 years, but peaceful. No walking on eggshells, no heavy sighs from the other room signaling incoming guilt trips, no fear of the next explosion. I sat on the floor in David's living room, leaning against the wall, watching him work with Jacob. David knelt next to my son on a drop cloth, both covered in sawdust. David was teaching him to use a miter box to cut wood for a custom canvas frame. "You have to measure twice, Jacob," David said, voice gentle, patient, the voice of a man who no longer had to shout to be heard. Precision matters. If the frame is strong, the art is safe. "Like this, Grandpa?" Jacob asked, sawing carefully, tongue poking out in concentration. "Exactly like that." My mother, Susan, lived in a small condo 2 towns over, her share of the divorce settlement barely enough to cover her expenses. She sent letters sometimes, long, rambling diatribes on expensive stationery, blaming us for ruining the family image, for embarrassing her at church, for being cruel. I burned them in the sink without reading past the first line. She was still trying to tax us for peace that didn't exist, but we'd stopped paying. Jessica was working retail at a mall kiosk selling phone cases. The fraud investigation had concluded with no criminal charges against David. The forensic accountant's report validated every claim. The cabin sold within 3 weeks, the proceeds covering about half of what Susan and Jessica had stolen from the retirement fund. Jessica was drowning in legal fees from her own attorney, trying to fight the financial investigation. She'd sold her car, moved into a studio apartment. For the first time in 33 years, she was facing life without a safety net. The fall had been hard. I looked at my son. He wasn't flinching anymore, wasn't hiding. He was making a mess with glue and wood, laughing when he spilled wood glue on the floor. He didn't freeze, just grabbed a rag and wiped it up, knowing no one would scream. I realized then that the price of this peace had been high. We'd had to break the family to save the people, burn down the structure to save the foundation. It was a heavy cost, but looking at my father's relaxed shoulders, looking at my son's easy, unburdened smile, it was the best bargain I ever made. If you've ever had to break a bond to save yourself, type freedom in the comments. Let's remind each other we made the right choice. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles, 0 cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one.